Hey, welcome to Tell Us Something. EdStalling is no stranger to adventure. He spent years working in the woods of Alaska alongside brown bears on search and rescue teams where he was 0 for 5 in CPR. I don't know if I want him on my backpacking team. He sort of reminds me of one of the protagonists of one of the best books I've read this year, The Plowman's Tale. Pick it up at Fact and Fiction Books if you haven't read it. It's awesome. Nothing to do with Alaska, but the guy doesn't do search and rescue well, I'll say that. You've probably seen EdStalling playing drums on Higgins with the Soul City Brass Band.
Yeah.
He might be driving the Ed Norton Big Band or with the Captain Wilson Conspiracy and the John Flortis Trio. If you like jazz, catch him with the Basement Boys tomorrow night at 7 p.m. right here on this very stage at the Top Hat. Please welcome EdStalling.
So New York City, New York City is an amazing, amazing place for an adventure. It's a magical, magical place, but you got to know the exact right place to go in New York City to have that magical time. My brother Bob and I, about 20 years ago, found that magical place in the New York Public Library. Not just in the New York Public Library, but down in the basement of the New York Public Library, way down in the northeast corner, there's a windowless, musty old room called the Microfiche Room. Where, now if you're under 30, you can look up microfiche probably, you can Google it or something. But it's these old machines, you sit down in there, and we would walk up the stairs, the marble stairs to the New York Public Library every morning, wait for the doors to open. We'd rush down into that microfiche room so we could get one of the machines or two of the machines. We'd spend all day in there. We'd be the last people to leave that room. We'd leave to take the train back to Connecticut where he was living at the time, and we just kept doing that day after day. That one day, it was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, from the other side of the microfiche room, he yelled, "I got it! Bingo! Holy shit! I found it!" After days and days of work. So, what he had found was we had been looking through the U.S. Census reports for 1880, 1890, 1900, and I ran over to his machine and looked, and I said, "Holy shit! You have found the impossible." Our adventure had actually started about 6 or 7 months before. And like any good adventure, it started over alcohol. We had been having a couple beers. I was the genealogist in the family, and we were talking about my grandmother, my father's mother, who died when he was only 2 years old. His father quickly remarried, and she was an alcoholic. And in a drunken fit of rage one night, she had burned every single picture that existed of his original mother. And for some reason, which I still don't understand, his father never talked about the original mother. He was a merchant marine that was never home and married 4 or 5 other times. So he knew nothing about his mother other than that her name was Emma Schmidt and that there was some kind of connection to Cuba. As the genealogist, I had dug around and had found some things, but, basic vital statistics, boring facts, when she died. And on her death certificate, it said she was born in Havana, Cuba, which I thought was interesting. But very little information. My brother, being a tenacious Northeasterner who knows nothing about genealogical research, over a couple of pints of beer, he said, "Look, you know that somewhere in this country, sitting in an attic in an old cardboard box, is a photo album with pictures of her." What's the chance of that? And I said, there probably is. He said, what's the chance we could ever find that? And I said, absolutely impossible. Now, this was the days before internet. It was just coming on, so you couldn't just push a button and find things. You had to do a lot of work. And I said it would take years of work and probably $10,000 of research and just all kinds of stuff. He got another pint, and he kept pushing me. He said, let's give it a shot. I said, absolutely no way, you're insane. Bought another pint of beer. And finally, after 4 pints of beer, I said, all right, I'll commit to a year. We'll work together for a year, and we'll go after this thing. And the next morning I said, what the hell have I done? Because I knew what it would take. A lot of trips to New York, just lots of library work, just going through all of this stuff. So our plan was his mom, I found her in the U.S. Census, and she had a couple brothers and a couple sisters. So I said, hey, if we can find, this was his mom, she had our dad, and here's us. For the brothers and sisters, if we can find their grandkids, like us, they might have a photo album. That's our best chance. Let's work off of the siblings. The brothers, we worked on for about a month. Forget about it. It was horrible. The last name was Schmidt. Have you ever looked in? You probably haven't. But if you ever do look in the 1900 U.S. Census for Manhattan for the name Schmidt, right? You're done. So on to the sisters. Now here's something about genealogical research. Sisters suck. The reason sisters suck for genealogists is you might find them at 16 years of age, then they get married, and 10 years later when the next U.S. Census is done, they're gone forever until you find out who they married. And that's very tough to find. At least it was before the internet. So sister one, what he had found that day in the microfiche room of the New York Public Library, when he said, holy shit, was the impossible. He had found sister number one living in the same household, but with her new husband. So we knew who she married, right? So now we have a fresh lead to go on. Not only that, but it was a very odd name. So only 40 people in the country had that last name, so we started calling them. All 40, we started calling them. Now, it was tough because you say, hear me out. You don't know me, but I'm talking about, do you know these people from 100 years ago in Manhattan, right? They're living here. This was their names. Click. You'd call them back and say, no, seriously, hear me out because you've got the same last name as these. Click. 2 people actually said, I'm black. Are you black? I said, no, I'm not black. They said, click. It's not. So the last number I called was in Hawaii, and the reason is because back then Hawaii was expensive. We didn't have any money. Called Hawaii, gave him the spiel, no click. It's silent. And he goes, you're talking about my grandparents, my grandmother. And I said, oh my God, found the family just like we thought. I spent the next 2 months with the people in this person's family. We've become close, that knew their family history, but a complete dead end. They knew nothing about my father's mom. They never knew she had a sister, that their grandmother had a sister named Emma. Done, dead end. So we're basically done, but there was one thing they did know. They knew who the second sister had married, which totally opened up that lead. Her name was Consuelo Schmidt, and they said, we know that she, true story, I got picked. So she said that she married a guy named Rhodes. I spent another month looking for Consuelo Rhodes and found her in Virginia. She had just passed away 3 years ago at 90 years old in a nursing home. I found the death records. So it ends up she had lived for all the time I was growing up in Connecticut. She had lived 30 miles away from my dad, his mom's own sister that could have told all kinds of tales. I found her, she had passed away, but I found out she had a son. And I found out the son was very high up in the Pentagon. So I had the balls to call the Pentagon, which I was really scared about, and talking to this guy that's high up and said, now, listen, I started telling him this tale. He goes, it's very disturbing that you know so much about my family and that you know my mom and that she's from Cuba. He said, I'll tell you what, I have absolutely no interest in any of this. I just never have. But I have every box that my mom owned in the attic, And I will guarantee to you that over the next winter, every now and then if I have time, I'll look through these photos. He didn't even know it was in the boxes. I said, great, thanks. We kept in touch a little bit. About a month later, he called me and he goes, isn't your last name Stalling? I said, it is. He goes, I got a photo on the back, and on the back it says Stalling. He found 2 or 3 more. He did not want to even send those to us, but he said, I'll tell you what, fly to Washington, D.C., you can stay in my house, we'll go through all these boxes together. So I flew my father, who's now like 75 years old, my brother and I, we all flew in. He opened up his home, his wife and him, to us. We went through all these boxes, but by the time we got there, it was like midnight, right, with my father. He picked us up at the airport. We get into this guy's house, and his wife is showing us where we can sleep. And I said, no, the picture. Where's the picture? He goes, that can wait till morning. He really said, that can wait till morning. And I'm thinking, what if my father dies, right? Tonight, in the same house as the picture of his mother. He pulls out the picture, shows it to my dad. My dad looks at the picture and goes, oh my God, I've never seen a picture of my father so young. And that woman, it looked like a wedding picture that his arm is around. He goes, she looks exactly like my brother. And his finger touched her face, and he goes, that's my mom. And my brother and I looked at each other, and we said, you know what? We did it. My father died about 3 years later, and at his funeral, at the end of the funeral, my brother came over. We had a private little toast with our beer, and we said, you know what? We gave a hell of a gift to Dad. And that's it. Thank you.
Oh, and by the way, tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, the Disney Boys right here.